Lovely to meet you. I'm Eleanor. I work at Deloitte. I'm one of the facilitators for today's session. And we're about to kick off our hack here. Just before I hand over to Brooke, who's going to kick off our panel. So the way the session's going to work is that we're going to have a panel discussion which will kind of explore the topic. We'll have about half an hour for that. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of break out into some different groups and explore some problem statements together and then kind of play that back. So yeah, really looking forward to the conversation. But yeah, I'll hand over to Brooke.
Thank you, Eleanor. Great to see you all here today. I'm very pleased to be here to talk about this topic with my fellow panelists here because it's a critical one. It's a kind of, I don't want to say rubber meets the road, I hate those kind of sayings, but you know what I mean. This is where we turn theory into practice. This is where we understand what can actually be done to deliver on some of the key elements of what the UK government and EU governments are demanding, and that's that clean production, green growth in international markets is achieved so that the amount of waste being generated here from textiles and the cost of that waste is reduced. So we're on a bit of a time crunch. So I'm going to do a very quick introduction of the panelists and then an introduction to the concept. Then we're going to have a few questions that are at the heart of the topic. So I'll start to my left. It's Salli Deighton we have here, who's from LaundRE. She's the founder of this circular and sustainable denim consultancy. To my immediate right, Dr. Hakan Karaosman, who is an academic on supply chain systems. And my far right, Dr. FReSCH, who is the founder of Supreme Creations and Bags of Ethics. So between all of us, we spend a lot of time in factories in Asia, looking at the supply chain and understanding where the greatest impacts are. So for this discussion today, we're going to address where the biggest impacts are and where the biggest levers are for everyone in the room to understand how they can change what they do to reduce the impacts of products that are bought in the UK but not made in the UK. So let's start with you first, Salli, because you're a very, I'm going to just say long-time denim developer, and you understand every facet, not only of denim design, but also production. And for anyone who hasn't worked with denim, it's total geek territory, I think you'll think is fair. It's full of specialists and experts when it comes to dye stuffs, treatments, and materials. Could you tell us a little bit about the essential knowledge that a buyer or designer of denim here in the UK would need to have in order to make sure that the factory producing their goods, probably in the Far East, is able to deliver on clean production, which is reducing the resources used to make the product, and also help with circularity for green growth?
Absolutely. I was very fortunate. I started my career a long time ago. Like you say, I'm old. I've been around a while. And we used to have factories and laundries in the UK. So as a young designer developer, I was sent to the factory. So everything I did, you saw how garments were made and produced. Since that's all moved to Asia, things have changed. And now I find a lot of companies don't have the budgets to send designers, developers, techs until they're actually senior. Mm-hmm. So we've lost some of that knowledge that needs to come back into the industry. But I work with brands and companies and have done for a long time, everything from fibre, dyeing, all the way through the supply chain. So when we work with companies, I echo what Paul and Simon both said. Understanding your manufacturer is key with denim. If you know they've got the right equipment and you know the mill has got the ability to dye and produce in the right way, you engineer denim and jeans and garments into the design and into sustainability, most importantly. So we would assess the garment we want to achieve. We would work on the fibre construction, what fibres we use. Again, huge fan of RenewCell. It's a very important new fibre the industry should have been behind and needs to get behind. So we can engineer the fabric, we can dye it better. So the dyeing responds in the laundry process. One thing I did when I worked with Marks and Spencer's, we worked with the mill to engineer the dyeing on the fabric so that we saved in laundry. If it's not dyed so heavy and it's dyed in a slash dye or superficial way, we can actually offset some of the cost through using the new technology in laundry through ozone, laser, as Levi's have promoted FLX for a long time. The industry's shifted to better technology.
Yeah. Was that clean core, Salli?
The clean core dyeing is one of the methods. There's many out there.
Yeah.
A lot of the factories have different. They installed new dyeing boxes and reduced the amount of water and dye stuff that we use in the dyeing process. But we have to know what to ask the mill, and we have to know how to direct the factory to do that.
So really, the days of saying, "Oh, I love this jean. We want to copy this and sell it, but with a few tweaks," are gone.
I believe they're gone. Absolutely.
So
we have to take responsibility. As people who are very privileged to create products, we're very lucky. We have an amazing job.
It's true, yeah.
We have to understand the chemicals, the dyeing, the fibres. You wouldn't build a house not knowing what you're putting in it.
No,
we have to take that responsibility and engineer it into the business's target so we meet the demands of the business financially as well.
And when you say we have to, actually what we mean today is that we have to because regulation is coming, which will mean that EPR fees will be higher for goods that haven't considered these sorts of factors. And of course, if you have, then eco-modulation may allow you to have a discount on your EPR fees, which is already in place in France. But also there's further legislation, ESPR in Europe. And as has been well mentioned earlier by previous panelists, those regulations apply to any brand selling products on the EU market. And in terms of scope, whilst some of the regulations may be targeting the largest manufacturers, DPP will be applicable for every textile product, regardless of the size of your company. So this is coming for everyone. So I think the kind of guidance that you can give that allows that impact reduction and the demonstrable evidence around how the textiles have been sourced, how they've been dyed, how they've been processed is critical. Now before we quickly move on, there's some critical technologies and some critical education gaps that could unlock some significant impact reductions. Could you tell us about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're LaundRE and we are putting a reshoring and refinishing unit to help brands and retailers reprocess stocks in the UK. It's something that used to happen years ago in the UK. We can import jeans unfinished or part finished, or we can refinish them. So we're recruiting at the moment. And I can't find laser designers in the UK. The majority of the denim industry and all the fantastic suppliers in Bangladesh and Pakistan that have invested in that technology, wall-to-wall laser machines, yet we don't teach that skill here. And you can be super creative. It's very exciting. It's a graphic skill. And how we embrace that technology rather than just saying, unfortunately I see buyers who go, "Oh, those whiskers are ugly." The designers need to design it and create it. You need to understand the technology and apply it. So there is a big piece that I hope when LaundRE is operational that we'll be able to train the next skill set and inspire people, get young designers in and show them what can be done. And this needs to be integrated into university courses now, really does, because we wash jeans, we finish them, we're getting cleaner. I think we've done a lot of work in our industry, but ultimately we make a jean raw, and then we remove the indigo. So how we do that is the secret to delivering on truly sustainable products.
Such a strange concept, isn't it? To deeply, deeply dye a material only to remove that dye. Just a point that I'd like to pick up on there as well, and one that Adam Mansell mentioned this morning in the opening address, and that is that there's research being done by UK groups abroad in the Far East to understand manufacturing best practice, to bring the skills that are in those manufacturing hubs here to the UK. And that's a recognition that the expertise isn't here. We do not know how to make products.
We don't.
We don't, but we need to in order to design them better and procure them better. So I just thought that was a beautiful sort of poetic moment that we have a lot to learn from the supply chain, and we don't often recognise that.
And we have to respect that.
We absolutely do.
The investment that's been made overseas, some of the factories are like starships.
They
and the only factory, when I worked with Simon, that we could find in the UK to help us, we had scissors and we had old school practices and leaky washers. We have got a long way to go in the UK.
Completely.
But LaundRE and companies like us, we want to drive that change and bring positive fashion manufacturing back to the UK and soon to deliver on everything that's about to happen and legislation. So.
And Sri, let's talk a little bit about the area that you've been working in Supreme Creations, because you've been in manufacturing now for, I think, 40 years. Is that correct? Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have.
Just shows my age.
A few decades, plus or minus. But you actually started off with your factory in Wales.
Yeah.
and then responded to Tony Blair's Courtauld directive around single-use plastics and really kick-started your production after that in Pondicherry in India. So you're working with mass production. I think at the time it was mostly packaging, I believe, and retail point of sale and merchandising goods. But you've seen a lot of shift, no doubt, in mass production in India. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you're incorporating circularity and also upcycling? Because I know you've got Bags of Ethics operating now, so...
Yeah, thank you. Let me just start as to why we are here today. Some years ago, we talked about recycling, upcycling, and all that. It was all to do with academics or perhaps King Charles, he talked about all that. But we are here today because, the consumers are demanding it. People voting with their wallets are saying, look, we want to buy products which are ethically manufactured, which have eco-credentials, all these things about REACH compliance, ink being, meeting international standards have all come in the last few years. So my company, as you said, we got involved with this some years ago with the Courtauld Pact and where single-use plastic was banned. Not particularly banned, but then there was a gentleman's agreement that we should reduce single-use plastic bags. And the big boys, Tesco, Marks and Spencer's, Co-op, they all agreed to reduce single-use plastic bags. And then we got involved in making, bags for them. And the Tesco jute bags, the ones with the ladybird, were produced by us, and we reduced perhaps over 30 billion plastic bags. Now, we have moved forward because what has happened is that the same thing, which people kept repetitively repeating, it was a behavioral change. And people said, oh, look, we bought a reusable bag, but then we introduced fashion. And that's how we got involved with the British Fashion Council, and Caroline Rush has been very helpful, and she had the vision to bring in fashion to ensure that the reusable bag is a fashionable bag. Now, we went recently to India, and I just mentioned this because it's part of the discussions that you've had. And this was a delegation which Jamila organized from the Department of Trade and Caroline Rush from the British Fashion Council. And there were a lot of wonderful panel discussions in my factory. And one of the things, and you mentioned that we've got to learn from the suppliers in India. One of the things that, one of the panelists from India said, look, you're trying to teach us about circularity, but it's been in our DNA. We wear saris, the saris, which is a 9-yard cloth, but, we extend the life, we extend the end of life, because it starts off with a sari, which is worn, then it becomes a sling bag for a child. It is also becoming a bag. Then, when it's completely gone, it's used as a duster, a mop, and all that. So the end of life has been extended, and this concept of circularity has been there, not just in India, but most parts of Asia, Africa. So they've used and reused products to ensure that this whole thing is extended. And if you look at, say, America today, the studies say that approximately 50 kilograms of clothes are discarded by the American public. That's, if you just do the maths, and I did the maths, it's 340 million people. You multiply that by, 50 kilos, you've got 17 billion kilograms going into waste. Yeah. Only 15% is recycled.
Just to add to that very quickly, Sri, just because I think it will be helpful context for everyone. Recently, on a trip to Bangladesh, I travelled out to rural areas and saw some of the plastic collection recycling that was in place. And there are little informal hubs that are set up where local community groups go out and gather plastic bottles, put them in a sack, take them back to a central location in the town where they've invested in a mechanical, like a mulching, shredding sort of tool. They wash them, they wash the bottles, lay them out in the sun, shred them, lay the chips out per colour, bag them up again, and then sell them on to the next person in the chain, who then sells them on to another person in the chain, who then sells them on to somebody who turns them into sewing thread. So, and it is absolutely true that circularity in Asia is far more advanced than it is in anywhere in the US or Europe. We just choose to market it and talk about it in such a way that it's a sort of high concept idea that we need to sell back to producers. And half of my family is Asian, and I've benefited from the resold, reused sari. So.
But you see, there are challenges. You know, we're now working with two major British brands. You know, one of them has got cuts. You know, they have these virgin material, which they just send off to the incinerator. Now, they are happy to give us those cuts, and they said, look, can you use them? And because it's a major brand and they were happy to use that particular brand in that other products that we make. So we've got, you know, container loads of that particular cuts. The other one, I mention it because there are issues and problems which I just want to address. The other one is a brand which has got finished products which they want us to upcycle. It's easily said in a discussion here, but when you look at all the problems that we face, how do you collect it? How do you segregate it? How do you then transport it? The cost of transportation. Then the cost of duties, taxes. And then when you then produce, suppose you're upcycling a product, we did a research that it costs 4 times more to produce something when it's upcycled. So, you know, we don't have the machines today to, you know, take all these waste and do it on an industrial scale, because for 40, 50 years, we've got the machineries for manufacturing, but we don't have the machinery to sort of upcycle. So those are challenges, and I think, you know, it's the right time today for us to discuss and also ask people in government, we've got Jamila sitting here, to talk about how we look at duties and, you know, customs and all that, because governments are simply saying, you know, the Indian government says, look, this is the duty. What is the value of a garment? Is it £100, which is the resale value, or is it £10, which is the perceived value? And do you charge duties at £100 because you're just importing something and then re-exporting? So that's a major challenge that we're facing, because at the end of the day, people are happy to buy a upcycled product, providing it's not that much more expensive. But if you then charge them 4 times, they're not going to buy it.
There's no viable business model in that. And I think that's why the hierarchy at the moment really lies within better decision-making around design and production. Also because, of course, the use phase of products is being extended because of EPR and other regulations. And so I think it's not unfair to say that the opportunity around disassembly and recycling in that manner is very far away compared to the immediate need to reduce emissions, chemical loads, and all of the impacts associated with the production process, particularly when we talk about volume. Because one thing we haven't mentioned is the business model where apparel can be exported directly from a factory in Asia to a consumer here and fly below the de minimis minimum. So we actually don't even know in the UK how much textile volume and what type of textiles are on the market, you know, let alone sort of working out what we might do, you know, down the line once we do get recycling infrastructure. So there's a lot of decisions that need to be made sort of early on, I think, before we can get to the stage of exploiting that opportunity. But what I want to talk about now, while we still have some minutes left with you, Hakan, is the difficulty around having a discussion like this and recognising that the only metrics ever presented are environmental and economic ones. This is somewhat maddening for me as a journalist. And I can share honestly with everyone that I write for Forbes about sustainability, and I get far higher traction and readership on articles that are about textile innovations and design compared to anything I write about social sustainability. Just telling you straight. It looks like people don't care as much, honestly. And this is a problem because we only measure how much resource reduction there is with water or chemical load, or how much cheaper it is once you use, less water and less chemicals. We don't talk about the importance of improving the conditions and the environmental landscape for workers. And just one stat here, just to help you all have this in context. Shri, you helpfully talked about the amount of waste generated in the US per capita. A country like Bangladesh, so Bangladesh contributes to about 0.58% of global emissions. The per capita emissions are minuscule.
Yeah.
People in Bangladesh are not contributing to climate change at all. So to say you all have to change your manufacturing sector so we can